Comet, Lamet.
Oh, Comet, Lamet. So this is the book written by Eric Lamet, and I'm here in his lovely home in the Berkshires talking about the book, which is an inspiring book. And it is essentially, as it says on the cover, childhood memories in wartime Italy. But it's a part of my family's history in many ways, because I recently found out that my family rented space to the fascists to hold internees. Now, I'm very curious about their names and their history and the rest. Um, Eric, when I read the book, there were three parts that really moved me quite a bit. I mean, there were many times when I just had to put the book down because it was so moving, and it had universal appeal to humanity, and issues of forgiveness and empathy were very much illustrated. But I wrote down three quotations from the book, and one of them was from Ettore Costa. Costa. I get the name confused because I mentioned to you that a director named Ettore Scola is from Trevico, and so I get the name confused. But on one of the pages, you say that he was talking about his experience as a prisoner under the Nazis, and he said, "But if we all keep silent, evil will have won its first victory, and even without going to jail, we will all be prisoners for the rest of our lives." I earmarked the page. I had to read it again. It's very, very moving and very, very instructive to the world about what to do.
Well, I was very impressed with Ettore because I remember I was about 12 years old at the time, maybe 11 and a half, and this guy was a true bohemian. So that in itself was enough to impress me, because I had never met anyone who was a true bohemian. Now that doesn't mean that he dressed in rags. He was the kind of guy who spoke, he was a very intellectual individual to begin with. He spoke with an open mind, and he got him into a lot of trouble. In fact, it eventually made him blind because he got such beating. But also he had no interest in material things.
Yes.
He never had any interest in money. He came from a wealthy family, but never had any money. Why? Because he didn't care. He really didn't care. And whether he said those words or I fabricated them, it is certainly something that when I got into his head, I am sure that's the way he would have spoken.
Yes, I understand. Now, you mentioned the word bohemian, and the year that you met him was what,
1941.
41. Fully 10 years later in the United States, we had, of course, the Beat generation that came about with Allen Ginsberg and all the Beat. When I think of bohemian, I think of the 1960s. I think of Allen Ginsberg, and he was a person who was pretty much a hippie for his days.
Well, he wasn't a hippie. Bohemian in the sense of the opera Bohème, La Bohème.
Yes.
Which is an uncaring kind of lifestyle, meaning that having money was not any kind of virtue.
Yes.
And if you have ever seen the opera La Bohème, I mean, these four guys, they're there in an attic, and they're all talented, but they don't do anything to make any money.
Yes, yes.
And once in a while, somebody comes up with a few bucks so that they can go buy a herring and a piece of bread.
Sure, sure. Well, you met. One of the reasons I kept putting the book down, as I said, is there were all these universal themes, and you almost, by going through this experience as a young child, it was kind of a microcosm of the world, in many ways, because you met these people who were from all different backgrounds, and you saw everything in front of you, from a person dying, this person,
my friend's father. Yes.
Friend's father dying in front of you of a natural death, from what I understand, and you experience so many things. What goes through your head these days? I mean, was this period in your life what defined you as a person, or?
Oh, no question about it. it made me very much of a liberal thinker. Whether I would have become that way anyhow, I have no way of knowing. Um, I became a free thinker, and I'm not afraid to ever open my mouth.
Mm-hmm.
And that's certainly something that I learned from, partially from Ettore Costa, partially from my stepdad, Pietro Russo. My mother, on the other hand, she was an intellectual, but in that period of time, she was very, very cautious
Yes.
as to who she talked to and what she said.
Yes.
Um, she had the control that I never did have.
Yes.
And I guess it was fine for her, and I guess mine is fine for me.
Sure. Sure. Could I just interrupt for a moment?
Sure.
If we could turn